Good afternoon and welcome to this month's WorkRite webinar on learning how to do a risk assessment. My name's Ryan Church, I'm the WorkRite Sales Manager, and with me today I have the familiar voice and general star of the show, Ellie Hale, who, as many of you know, is our WorkRite Business Development Manager. Even better news than this, I'm delighted to introduce our guest speaker, Charlotte Bligh from Active Newham, who will be talking with Ellie about the importance of risk assessments and her recent risk assessment for a sports event involving the one and only Usain Bolt. Hi, Charlotte.
Yay. Hello.
During the webinar, we have a number of polling questions which we encourage you to join in with so we can get an accurate picture of your thoughts on various elements of the subject. And additionally, please do submit any specific questions that you have so Ellie can have the opportunity to answer them at the end of her presentation. It's also a great chance to check out our course to see if it's right for you. So, no further ado, Ellie, Charlotte, over to you.
Yay! Thanks for joining us, Charlotte.
That's okay.
So first off, if you could just tell us a bit about Active Newham and your responsibilities there. How many staff have you got? This is quite complex,
Okay.
isn't it?
Yeah, so Active Newham is actually a very new company. We've only been trading for 4 years. We were put together to manage mainly the leisure facilities within the borough of Newham, but also the responsibility for delivering sports development packages and a volunteers programme. So
Right.
as it stands now, Active Newham has 5 leisure centres. We manage sports programmes, activities. We have a volunteers programme with 4,000 registered members on it, but
Crikey.
active of about 300. And we have on our books as staff sort of 300 to 350 sort of staff on books, but we have a core sort of full-time staff that work within the leisure centres and delivering projects.
Mm-hmm. So in terms of risk
So-
assessment, is it your responsibility? Is it your sole responsibility to perform the risk assessments, or can you delegate, or how does it work?
I can delegate out. We offer a wide sort of range of training to our staff at different levels, for our managers downwards, so they have an understanding and a good scope of what a risk assessment is and how much should be involved in it.
Mhm.
My job is actually to sort of sign off and confirm that they're sort of fully and complete and comply with legislation, what we set out as an organisation, and that it sort of works against what practices we do.
Right. How did it work for the athletics event that you did recently?
Okay, so as part of the World Athletics, as it's been hosted in Newham, our work with the council as a community delivery for activities led us to deliver staff into the back fan zone out at the stadium. But the big one is one of our leisure centres has the capacity of a outdoor track and an indoor sprint track, and they needed a training venue for the athletes to train at while the competitions were going through. So our leisure centre was used and commissioned for that. So through the World Athletics, we've had a number of people, but sort of between 200 athletes a day attending site to do track and field events.
Uh-huh.
Sorry, go on.
No. What were you going to say?
I was going to say, we had a full team, so you can imagine we had the first person through the doors on that day was Usain Bolt.
Yeah.
Down to, yes, it was good, down to the full USA team being there, practicing sprints, to the Australian team. So it's a lot of ongoing work, trying to manage all that risk with language barriers, what different athletes are looking for, what different coaches are looking for, and just managing that amount of people as well as keeping our leisure centre operational at the same time.
Sounds like a lot of work. Sounds like a lot of work, but also it must have been a lot of fun as well.
It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of organisation, talking to multi-agencies and different levels, so talking through what they call London 17, who were the organisers, to the IAAFA, to our sort of centre staff, to volunteers coming in with the IAAFA, making sure once they step on our premises they are aware of what we expect of them, our processes, our emergency plans, and sort of built into all those risk assessments.
How you were doing your risk assessments? Was it just a kind of spreadsheet format that you had to go through?
Yeah. So at the moment, we are still just on, we use SIMSPA, which is Chartered Institute for Sport and Recreation Management. They have templates for the mainly industry and leisure that are done manually on a spreadsheet. The problem we've been having with those is, you can imagine, a lot of information has been filled, but trying to track any actions that need following, review dates and that. So we have actually just purchased the risk management system from yourselves to help bring that all together. The organisation has grown. We've built, since we took over, we've built 2 new leisure centres. Our teams are expanding, and we need a more efficient way of managing and tracking everything.
Brilliant. You guys are just implementing that at the moment, aren't you? The risk
we're just on the start of sort of rolling out the process of trying to bring it all in, because as you can imagine, we don't just have sort of your standard office risk assessments. We have offices in all our leisure centres, but we have activities that have to cover from swimming pool activities to studio classes to physical structures to chemical handling for plant rooms, plant machinery, lifting, hoisting.
Your job and what you've got to do.
Yeah, so a number of risk assessments are across the business. New projects are being delivered, new changing. If we're delivering projects outside, that ongoing issue of environment and areas and different children numbers coming, always constant and reviewing and tracking them.
How many risk assessments do you say you do, like per month or
per
year, would you say?
Per year involved. So one leisure centre on its normal operation can have about 80.
Crikey.
So yeah, we have a lot going on all the time, trying to manage and track them and review, because we have a process of reviewing risk assessments. Are there any near misses, major incidents? As you can imagine, our footfall for our leisure centres across all sites is about 150,000 a month.
Wow.
Of participation. So there's a lot to track.
For those risk assessments.
Yes, we have to be on the ball for it.
Yeah, amazing. Oh, Charlotte, thanks for having a chat with us about that. That's grand.
That's okay.
Much appreciated, and have a lovely rest of your day. I'm going to let you go while I show the rest of the guys our new course.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you for your
Cheers,
time.
Charlotte. Thanks.
All right, bye.
Okie doke then, guys. So here we are. We are very excited about this course. How to perform an office risk assessment. So as always, I'll whiz you through. While you're looking at this though, guys, it's worth bearing in mind that for our first time ever, we are going to put a mad special offer out. So if you want to have this course, you can have it added. Existing WorkRite customers can have this added to their system for £250 if you just register your interest with us today. Okay, so this course will provide you with the foundations to carry out a risk assessment at work. This section will introduce what is a risk assessment, who must carry out a risk assessment, why is a risk assessment necessary. It will talk about the legislation, how to adapt risk assessments for your workplace, and talk about what is a hazard and what is a risk. A risk assessment asks 3 core questions. What can go wrong? What can you do to prevent it? And what can you do to reduce the impact if it does happen? It can be split into 6 stages. Hazards. Identify what in your workplace could cause harm to people. People. Consider who is at risk of being harmed and how they can be harmed. This will make it easier to identify how to control the risk. Existing controls. So consider what measures are already in place to reduce the risk of harm. Risk. Evaluate the likelihood of the harm occurring against the severity of the consequences if it does occur. Take action. Decide on and implement appropriate controls to reduce the risk to an acceptable level. And record and review. Record your risk assessment and review when necessary. So here we go, guys. We've got our first poll. We're going to ask you, who is it that must carry out a risk assessment? Is it the responsibility of the employee or the employer? So we've got that poll open now. What do you reckon, guys? Is it every employee's, or is it the employers or self-employed persons? What do you reckon, Ryan?
I'm not too sure. I think I may have selected the wrong question here.
Oh, Ryan.
First time of my attempting to be the lead on deciding which question we have. And I've gone and selected the wrong one. Apologies.
Well, it doesn't matter. This is the problem with the live performance, Ryan. Who knows what's going to happen next? We just don't know. So anyway, guys, I'm going to go with that one. And I was right. It's a legal requirement for you as an employer or self-employed person to assess the risks to the health and safety of your employees while they're at work. You can delegate this task to others, but ultimately you are responsible, and you will need to make sure that whoever does the risk assessment is competent to do so. So why a risk assessment? Because it is a legal obligation for good reason. It improves safety and minimises workplace injuries and the onset of ill health. It improves safety, minimises workplace injuries, and helps reduce ill health. There we go. Some 621,000 people were injured in the workplace between 2015 and 16. 1.3 million workers suffered a new case of ill health. There were 30.4 million working days that were lost due to work-related illness and workplace injury. And the financial cost is huge. Between 2014 and 15, the estimated cost of injuries and ill health from current working conditions was 14.1 billion. That is mad. So the Management of Health and Safety at Work Regulations, 1999. Suitable and sufficient assessment. Every employer and self-employed person must make a suitable and sufficient assessment of the workplace risks to their health and safety and that of their employees, the risks of the health and safety of persons not in their employment arising out of or in connection with their conduct, and measures to comply with the requirements and prohibitions under the relevant statutory provisions. Employers must assess measures to comply with Part 2 of the Fire Precautions Workplace Regulations 1997. And review. So the employer or self-employed person who made the assessment must review it if there have been any significant changes or there have been improvements that still need to be made. If workers have spotted a problem which might increase the risk, or if there's additional information that's been gathered from accidents or near misses. A risk assessment must be based on the hazards, people, and control measures in your workplace. A generic risk assessment of the normal hazards in such an environment is not enough to satisfy the law, nor will it be sufficient to minimise the risk of injury or ill health to your people in the workplace. Isn't that a good picture of a plug? That's my favourite picture in this course. I love that plug. Fire safety assessment. So you're legally required to assess fire safety in your workplace. You should seek further information on how to do this. What is a hazard?
Right, so let's get this working correctly this time. There we go.
Is it something that's obvious, something that may cause harm to people, or is it the likelihood that something bad will happen?
Okay, around half people have voted so far.
What do you reckon?
For me, I'm pretty sure it's the second option.
Something that may cause harm to people.
Yeah, and it's been a...
And how's everyone done?
There we go. I went with the safe option. 96% of people agree with me.
Well done. Let's see if it's right. Yes, it's right. A hazard is something that may cause harm to people. So what is risk, guys?
Here we go.
Is it the human cost v the financial cost? Is it existing controls v new controls, or is it severity versus the likelihood?
We've got a pretty consistent set of answers coming in.
But you can't use other people's answers.
I'm asking for my personal opinion. Clearly, I'm very well versed in risk assessment, so it wouldn't be fair to ask me my opinion. Okay, that's most people voted.
But if you had to pick one, Ryan, which one would you pick?
Severity versus likelihood.
Is that what everyone else said?
That's what everyone else said, yes.
Brilliant, well done, guys. That's right. Risk is the chance that somebody could be harmed by these and other hazards, together with an indication of how serious the harm could be. In summary, a risk assessment is a legal requirement. It's essential in improving health and safety and minimising workplace injuries and the onset of ill health. In the next section, you'll learn how to identify, categorise and prioritise hazards, understand who may be at risk, and recognise when special requirements are needed for certain groups or workers. Here we go. So this section will cover hazards and harm, how to identify hazards, categorizing hazards, who you should consider, who might be harmed and how, and vulnerable groups. Remember, a hazard is something that may cause harm to people. This harm can be many things and encompasses much more than just physical accidents. Hazard: an unsuitable, incorrectly positioned chair or harmful desk setup. The harm could result in back pain. Hazard: long work hours and poor work-life balance. Could result in occupational stress. To carry out a risk assessment, you first need to accurately identify the potential hazards. The hazards will be different in every workplace, so you'll need to take the time to identify those present in your specific workplace. Begin by walking around and thinking about the jobs and tasks undertaken in the space. Consider what could cause harm, and then consider the following. Instructions and manuals can help spell out potential hazards relating to workplace equipment. They can also give an indication of who may be at risk and how severe the consequences may be, which will help you later on in your risk assessment. Take into account non-routine activities such as maintenance, cleaning, changing in production cycles and use of new equipment. Hazards associated with non-routine activities may be less obvious as they're not part of your or your employees' regular work. Your employees will also be familiar with the associated safety measures. Some hazards can't be recognised immediately. Consider what could cause harm over a period of time, such as long-term exposure to high levels of noise. Records of accidents and ill health can help you to identify patterns of accidents and injuries, making it easier to recognise less obvious hazards, as well as hazards that could cause harm over the long term. Some hazards are widely recognised. Employers should seek further guidance on how to assess these hazards and reduce the associated risks. These include working at height, manual handling, slip strips and falls, and display screen equipment and workstations. We've got some courses on all of those things.
We have.
Ask your employees to think what they think the hazards are, as they might notice things that are not obvious to you. Your employees can provide insight into how hazards and risks come about, and about the workability and effectiveness of potential controls. This can also help employees to work more effectively within the control measures you put in place, as they will understand the reasons for them. Grouping hazards into categories can help you consider them from different perspectives, and this will help you identify the hazards in your workplace. For example, in an office environment, you could split hazards into ergonomic, physical, and psychological hazards. Other environments could include chemical and biological hazards or mechanical hazards. For each hazard, you need to be clear about who might be harmed. Who should you consider? So, is it everyone that might enter the space, or is it everyone who might enter the space or be affected by it?
If you're asking my opinion this time, Ellie, I'd go personally with the first option.
What would you say there, Ryan?
I think it's everyone who might enter the space.
Okay.
Most
well, I
times.
think it's the second one.
Do you?
Because I think it's anyone who might enter the space or be affected by it.
Very
such
true.
As noise.
Okay, we've got most votes in now. So I'm going to close that.
What does the majority go with?
And I'm going to share that. And it looks as though they're all on your team and not my team.
Okay. That's because we're winners, Ryan. Your risk assessment should consider everyone who might enter the space or be affected by it. Well done, lads. So there's no need to list individuals by name. Just think about the groups of people doing similar work who may be affected. So office staff, maintenance personnel, contractors, people sharing your workplace, operators of equipment, cleaners, and members of the public. Some groups are at increased risk of harm and have specific requirements. You should pay special attention to these groups when considering hazards in the workplace. So visitors or temporary workers, pay attention to people who are not in the workplace all of the time. They are at increased risk of harm as they're less familiar with the potential hazards and the associated safety measures. Consider any risks to the health and safety of new or expectant mothers who might be at increased risk of harm from physical activities, work conditions, and other aspects. Consider that signs, instructions, safety warnings, and training materials may not be as effective towards people who are not completely fluent in English. Young workers might be at increased risk of harm as their awareness of hazards in the workplace will be low. If this group of workers represents a larger percentage of the workforce, the risk assessment may need to place more emphasis on the hazards and resulting harm. And people with disabilities, including both mental and physical conditions, may be at increased risk of harm. Determine what hazards may cause harm to these people and what adjustments you need to be made to existing safety measures. Again, the best approach may be to consult these persons and involve them in your risk assessment. First two stages of the risk assessment process are to identify the hazards and consider who may be harmed and how. The next stage of the risk assessment process is to evaluate the risk of harm caused by the hazards identified with the existing controls in place. Now we're going to evaluate the risk. So this section will cover what you should consider, what are you expected to do, what is reasonably practical, significant risks, risk matrices, and levels of risk. Once you've identified the hazards and the people at risk, you need to evaluate the risk. So what should you consider when evaluating risk? The likelihood. How likely is it that harm will occur? And how severe could that harm be? And what steps are you already taking to prevent this harm? You're probably already taking steps to protect your employees, but your risk assessment will help you decide whether you've covered all you need to do. So what are you expected to do? Is it to manage the main risks responsibly, or are you supposed to eliminate all of the risks?
I think I know the answer to this one. Is it manage the main risks responsibly?
Is it? Yeah. You can't be expected to eliminate all of the risks in a risk assessment.
In a perfect world, but that's not possible,
Or
is it?
are you supposed to? What's everyone else said?
Okay, I'm going to close it there, and there's the results. I was right, yes.
What are you? Let's just see. Oh no, what did you say? Manage the risks?
Yeah.
That's right. Risk is a part of everyday life, and you're not expected to eliminate all risks. You should know about the main risks and the things you need to do to manage them responsibly. You're not expected to anticipate unforeseeable risks, only what you could reasonably be expected to know. Good stuff. So the law requires you to do what is reasonably practical. So what must you do to fulfill this duty? Is it everything possible with the resources you have available? Is it to weigh the risk against the money, time and trouble needed to control it? Or is it to take a hands-on approach to reduce the risk?
I would say the third option, but I'm not sure. Oh no, possibly this is reading again. Probably the second option, actually.
Oh, I was going for one.
Between us, we've got a pretty wide spread of responses there.
What's everyone gone for?
We've got nearly everybody in now. Quite a split, actually. There we go. We've got 54% of people said weigh the risk against the money. 31% said everything possible with the resources, and 15% take a hands-on approach to reduce risk.
So the middle one.
Middle one.
That's right, guys. Well done. You should weigh the risk against the money, time and trouble needed to control it. You don't need to take action if these costs would be grossly disproportionate to the level of risk. That is, you don't need to use a large amount of time, money or trouble for a relatively insignificant risk. Good to know. HSE defines significant risks as those that are not trivial in nature and are capable of creating a real risk to health and safety, which any reasonable person would appreciate and would take steps to guard against. You don't need to address insignificant risk, nor do you need to include risks from everyday life unless your work activities increase the risk or severity of these occurring. Risk matrices evaluate risk based on the likelihood of harm against the potential severity of the harm. These categories enable you to assign values to risk, making it easier to determine whether or to what degree you need to apply control measures. What risk is tolerable and intolerable, acceptable and unacceptable, will vary from activity to activity, depending on the specific circumstances in your workplace and company's risk tolerance. The greater the risk, the greater the control measures that are needed. So if it's trivial, the risk is acceptable. No further action is needed other than maintaining existing controls. If it's tolerable, implement additional controls to lower the risk, so long as this can be achieved at low cost in terms of money, time and trouble. These controls take low priority, maintain existing controls. If it's moderate, seek to lower the risks to an acceptable level while balancing this need with the cost of control measures. Implement these within a defined period of time. Maintain existing controls, especially if the potential harm is severe. Make a concerted effort to reduce the risk and to reduce the risk. Implement risk control measures urgently and within the defined time period. Consider whether you need to halt the activity or put interim measures in place. You may need to allocate considerable resources to implement sufficient controls. Maintain existing controls, especially if the potential harm is severe, and if it is intolerable, the risk is unacceptable. You need to substantially improve the controls you have in place. Immediately stop the work while you improve the safety controls. If it's not possible to reduce the risk, you should not continue to work. And then on to the next bit. So in summary, once you've identified the risks that are unacceptable, you must take action to control them. You will learn more about controlling risk in the next section. So this will cover control measures, the hierarchy of control, and sensible risk management. Having identified the risks you need to address and in what order, you need to then put controls in place. Control measures can be split into 3 types. Prevention measures aim to reduce the likelihood of harm occurring. Protection measures seek to enclose or isolate the risk, create a physical barrier to it, or reduce exposure to it. And the aim of mitigation measures are to reduce the severity of any damage to facilities and harm to employees and the public. You should have them in place in case prevention and protection measures fail. Mitigation measures include emergency plans, evacuation planning, and warning systems. The hierarchy of control elaborates on the order in which you should employ prevention and protection measures. You should apply measures in this order. Elimination, so redesign the job or substitute the item so the hazard is removed or eliminated. Then substitution, replace the item or process with a less hazardous one. Engineering control, so make physical modifications to processes and process equipment or install new equipment. Prioritize measures that protect collectively over individual measures. And identify and implement new procedures such as reducing the time workers are exposed to hazards, increasing the use and effectiveness of safety signs and safety training. And personal protective equipment. So only use PPE if all previous measures have failed to control the risk. You'll need to train workers in the function and limitations of each piece of equipment. Risk management is about taking practical steps to protect people from real harm and suffering, not bureaucratic back covering. Bit of a tongue twister there. Risk management should include properly protected, so ensure that workers and the public are properly protected. Support innovation and learning in the workplace, do not stifle them. Manage risks responsibly and understand that failure to manage significant risks responsibly will likely lead to serious consequences. Balance benefits and risks, so provide overall benefit to society by balancing benefits and risks with a focus on reducing significant risks, both those which arise more often and those with serious consequences. And promote responsibility. Ensure that individuals understand that they should exercise responsibility as well as rely on their right to protection. Sensible risk management is not about scaring people by exaggerating or publicising trivial risks. It's not about stopping safe activities, stopping important activities that could cause harm if the risks weren't managed, but where the risks are properly managed. It's not about creating a totally risk-free society, and it's not about paperwork, generating useless mountains of paperwork. So you've learned how to identify the hazards and determine who may be at risk and how to evaluate and control risk. Now you need to learn how to record and review your assessments. So this covers, do you need to write down your assessment? What is suitable and sufficient? What should you record? Templates and review. It's always useful to write down your risk assessment, but some businesses are not required by law to do so. It depends on the size of your business. You must record your risk assessment if you have.
Just launch that one for you.
Is it 1 or more employees? Is it 5 or more employees? Or is it 20 or more employees? What do you reckon, guys?
I personally think it's 5.
I think it's 5 too. Yeah.
Okay, we've got most votes in.
But then self-employed people have to do it, so maybe it's 1.
Let's see what the answers are. It's closed, and there we go. We've got 77% of people say 5 or more, 15% say 1 or more, and just 8% say 20 or more. So the vast majority have gone with 5.
So let's see. That's right, guys. If you have 5 or more employees, you are required by law to write down and record your risk assessment. If you've got fewer than 5 employees, it's still advisable to write it down so you can review it at a later date. The law states that an assessment should be suitable and sufficient. So you properly identified the hazards. You considered all people who might be affected, particularly vulnerable groups. You assessed the risks presented by all identified hazards. You took reasonable precautions to control significant risks, and you ensured that the remaining risk was low. And what is it you should record? So you should record your significant findings. This includes work activity area under assessment, hazards identified, employees at risk, likelihood of the harm, severity of the harm, existing control measures, risk level and acceptability, and control measures to put in place for unacceptable risks. The Health and Safety Executive provides a risk assessment template for different types of workplaces, such as the office environment, but you must adapt these to your specific workplace. When must you, by law, review your risk assessment?
Now, I've already launched this one previously, so I can't show you the launch buttons. I'm really sorry.
Ryan ruined this one, so you'll just have to play along, but without a poll. You have reason to suspect that it's no longer valid or there's been a significant change. Is it every 3 years, or is it following a serious injury or incident of ill health?
I'd go with the first option personally. Or would you? Okay, we're on the same page.
Yeah. So let's go with that. I hope you guys have gone with the... Oh, we were wrong. That's incorrect. You must review your risk assessment if you have reason to suspect that it's no longer valid or there's been a significant change, which is what I just picked.
Okay.
It's good practice to review your risk assessment after significant changes and the introduction of new machinery and serious injury or instance of ill health. So you've nearly completed this course on how to carry out a risk assessment. Remember, identify the hazards, identify who is at risk, evaluate the risk, control the risk, record your assessment and review your assessment. And now you're ready to test your knowledge. And then with all of our courses, there's then a test to prove your understanding of the course content. So that's wrapping it up pretty much for our demonstration of how to perform an office risk assessment. We're really chuffed with this course. I think it's brilliant. And like I said, existing WorkRite customers, if you register your interest with me today, you can get me on elliehale@workrite.co.uk. You send me an email by today saying that you would like to add this to your WorkRite system for £250. We'll get that sorted for you.
Excellent. Well done, Ellie. We haven't yet got a title for next month's webinar, so we thought we'd actually ask you, our audience, what you'd like us to cover. All suggestions are very welcome, and we'll let you know in the next couple of weeks when and what we'll be covering. But Ellie, that was great taking us through the course. Thank you very much. Sorry about my minor mistake.
We'll let you off.
Thanks. And we wish you all a good weekend. Thank you very much.
Have a great weekend. Thanks for listening, and thanks to Charlotte.